There is some good news for the capital's commuters today. Planning work is to start on a £3.5 billion cross-London rail link. The government plan effectively revives the Crossrail scheme, which was abandoned in the mid-1990s. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is at Paddington Station with the details. Simon.
Alistair, this is where trains will eventually disappear into a hole in the ground and not see daylight again until they reach the city. Well, that's the theory anyway, behind a cross-London rail link between Paddington and Liverpool Street via Tottenham Court Road. It's not a new idea, but has been on the back burner for a number of years. The other new main line will run from Hackney to King's Cross, then into a tunnel to Victoria and out and on to Wimbledon.
I think this is really important for London and travellers into London. The mainline termini are reaching or at capacity now, and the next stage, looking strategically, is to take routes and mainline trains across London in the sort of tunnels that are being proposed today for Crossrail and for Wimbledon Hackney.
Simon, that's the theory, but how likely do you believe it is that we'll get these lines?
Well, this £150 million from the government today will allow preparation and design work on Crossrail to begin and a feasibility study into the other line. But Crossrail's going to cost £3.5 billion. It's going to be at least 5 years before building work starts, and only then if the entire cost of the project is met by the private sector. So, Alistair, as we know, we've been here before. I think it would be a little bit premature at this stage to start booking tickets. Back to you.
All right, Simon, live at Paddington, thanks very much. After years of argument, the controversial Crossrail project has taken a step closer to becoming reality. Work began today on a new ticket hall in the city. But sceptics point to a lack of either funding or a completion date and remain convinced the multi-billion-pound scheme will never run. 2 lines are proposed for Crossrail. The first runs east-west from Heathrow to Stratford and Canary Wharf. The second, north-south from Dalston to Clapham. Our political correspondent Simon Harris reports.
A nervous-looking Ken Livingstone got a crash course at the controls of a piling rig today. This was the start of London's most ambitious engineering project in decades, Crossrail. But to begin with, it will consist of nothing more than an underground ticket office on a railway line that doesn't exist. The developers of a £200 million city office block agreed to include the booking hall in return for planning permission.
This rail line with Crossrail 2 and the others we're working on will give us another 40% rail capacity in London by 2015.
The last attempt at an underground main line linking Paddington with Liverpool Street was abandoned in the 90s. The government balked at the cost. The new plan is even grander, 2 lines instead of 1. Despite the excitement surrounding this groundbreaking event, Crossrail has a major hurdle to overcome. Line 1 alone will cost £9 billion, and the same again for the north-south route, and no one yet has come up with the money. The answer lies with a mixture of public and private cash, for once the Mayor and government agree. But even some who support Crossrail wonder if it'll happen.
What all this is doing is raising people's expectations. It's probably a good publicity stunt for this new building, but it doesn't bring Crossrail a day nearer.
How much of the £9 billion have you raised so far?
None as yet. Government have allocated 154 million to us through the Strategic Rail Authority and Transport for London, and that money is now being spent on the first 3 years of work in progress, as it were.
But before the real work can begin, the tunnelling, the government will have to dig deep into its pockets.
The simple fact is if the government does not decide it is willing to put money into Crossrail, it won't happen. It's as simple as that.
Crossrail's backers believe the doubters will ultimately be proved wrong. But the first trains are unlikely to arrive for almost a decade. At Moorgate, this is Simon Harris for London Tonight.
The on-off saga of the Crossrail scheme took a new twist today when Mayor Ken Livingstone underlined his support for the project. He believes the east-west rail link would bring big benefits and could be built for far less than the current £10 billion estimate. He thinks London's businesses, though, should help with the cost. But as our political correspondent Simon Harris reports, some experts say they've heard it all before and Crossrail will never see the light of day.
Crossrail lies buried beneath a building site in the city. It consists of a solitary subterranean ticket office in the bowels of this development. There are no tracks, no tunnels, no trains. They may be a decade away, if they happen at all.
I think it's very, very unlikely that the Crossrail project will go ahead this time. It failed once before, and I'm afraid that the numbers get ever bigger each time it's delayed.
The idea, and it's been around for more than 100 years, is to build a mainline railway running under the capital from Paddington to Liverpool Street. The sticking point has always been the cost, now put at £15 billion. Crossrail is seen as an essential part of John Prescott's dream for thousands of new homes in the Thames Gateway, and vital if London is to host the 2012 Olympics. But the Treasury is far from convinced it's viable. For Ken Livingstone, who publicly launched work on the ticket hall a year ago, cancellation would be a humiliating blow. So today he proposed a tax on London businesses to help pay for it and suggested other ways of keeping the cost down.
No experimental state-of-the-art signalling system or any other old nonsense. Only technology that has worked, only rail systems that have worked elsewhere. Nothing experimental. And that immediately brought the cost back down under 10 billion.
And even one of the Mayor's fiercest critics backs a business levy.
I actually agree with Ken Livingstone that we do need to make sure that the private sector, where it's appropriate, makes a contribution, not least because they'll be, the private sector property owners, for example, will be some of the largest gainers. Quite how we do that is obviously something that we've got to think about, but I certainly wouldn't rule out the prospect.
Publicly, the Mayor remains optimistic about Crossrail, but to some transport experts, this project has always been pie in the sky. In the city, this is Simon Harris for London Tonight.
Meanwhile, Mr Livingstone didn't mince his words today as he launched an extraordinary attack on Transport Secretary Alistair Darling. His outburst was provoked by delays on the Crossrail project. The Mayor also revealed why he's lost no time in demolishing an old goods yard standing in the way of a tube line extension. This report from our political correspondent, Simon Harris.
Ken Livingstone wants Crossrail badly, but he needs government backing and taxpayers' money. So his attack on Transport Secretary Alistair Darling for saying the line won't be ready for the Olympics is all the more extraordinary.
Now, if the government decides to take the next 3 years getting the legislation through Parliament, then it's right. We most likely won't be able to have Crossrail ready in time. But if, the Secretary of State got off his arse and actually pushed the bill through, and we could start sometime towards the end of 2004, early in 2005, we'd have a chance.
Ken Livingstone said he was simply using the language of Londoners, but his outburst angered ministers. He is, after all, meant to be a partner in the project. The plan for an east-west main line running under the capital is a joint venture between the government's Strategic Rail Authority and the Mayor's Transport for London.
Perhaps the Mayor should get off his own backside and read his own documents first. The document itself says end of 2012 at the very earliest, probably more likely mid-2013.
The Department for Transport wasn't the only thing the Mayor was having a bash at today. He also ordered in the demolition gangs to start work on a new tube line. The old Bishopsgate goods yard is being razed to the ground to make way for the East London line extension. The scheme's been held up for 18 months by legal battles with protesters who claim it's a historic structure. But last week, a court ruling went in favour of the line, and now the contractors are moving quickly to thwart a challenge in the European courts.
Just dismayed, really. Dismayed that the people who live here, the East Londoners, haven't really had a chance to see what is there, and they're going ahead with it so quickly on the strength of a property deal.
Unlike Crossrail, this new railway should arrive in time for the Olympics. In the city, this is Simon Harris for London Tonight. What you have committed to in the past, previous manifesto, was Crossrail. This time you talk about continuing to work to develop a funding and finance solution. That still sounds like no Crossrail.
No, I am absolutely committed to Crossrail. I think it's essential for the future of London. I really do. But you've got to work out the right financing package. It's a huge financial commitment.
Is the obstacle to Crossrail Gordon Brown?
No, it's not at all. The obstacle is you need a financial package that's valid. You can't undertake an investment as big as this. And, it's very similar to the issue I have up in Manchester at the moment about what they call the Metrolink. You've got to make sure there's a viable financial plan in place, but we're absolutely committed to doing it.